During a family trip, my mother-in-law tried to cut me out of the family photo album, literally. "You were never really one of us," she said. But the photographer's confession the next morning left her begging for forgiveness. "My name is Callie. I'm 36, married to Adrian, who's now 39. We live in Asheville, North Carolina. I work as a graphic designer for a mid-sized publishing firm, and he's in finance. We've been together for almost a decade now, married for 5. I never had a perfect relationship with my in-laws, but I thought things were at least tolerable, especially after years of polite family dinners, birthdays, and holidays. Adrian's father, Burton, always treated me with a quiet, warm respect, and his sister Clara mostly stayed in her own world. But Judith, my mother-in-law, was another story. Judith is the kind of Southern matriarch you read about in novels. All pearls and polished smiles at dinner parties, but ruthless behind closed doors. She ran the Renshaw family like a CEO of a small, emotionally dysfunctional corporation. And in her eyes, I was never qualified to be hired. I wasn't raised wealthy. I grew up in a small town in Georgia, the daughter of a public school teacher and a man who fixed lawn mowers for a living. We didn't go on fancy vacations, and we certainly didn't own summer homes. I didn't come with pedigree or a hyphenated last name. What I did have has talent, hard work, and a love for Adrian that never wavered, even when I sensed his family considered me an outsider. Adrian had always stood up for me when things got awkward. But as anyone in a long-term relationship knows, constant tension with in-laws has a way of eroding even the strongest bonds, drop by drop. Then came the family trip to Charleston. It was supposed to be a celebration, Burton's 70th birthday. Judith pulled out all the stops. She rented a historical mansion near the Battery that looked like it had hosted duels and ghost stories. It was beautiful and intimidating in equal measure. We were 10 people under one very creaky roof. Me and Adrian, his parents, Clara and her husband Miles with their 3 young kids, and Aunt Alois, Judith's eccentric sister who wore velvet in July and always had wine by 3 p.m. The first 2 days were tense but tolerable. Judith acted overly polite with just a little too much cheerfulness around me. I recognized it immediately, the way people behave when they're playing a part for a performance. But day 3 is when everything broke. Judith had arranged for a professional family photo shoot. She hired a local photographer named Dorian, who was well known in Charleston for his traditional family portraits. Everyone was excited, or at least pretending to be. Judith had even picked out outfits. The men were to wear cream linen, the women light pastels. Nobody told me. I found out when I saw everyone in coordinated colors and realized I stood out in my soft green dress like a sore thumb. It wasn't that they made a fuss about it. That would have been almost easier. Instead, they said nothing, which somehow made it worse. Dorian was kind, though, professional, polite. He tried to include me in poses naturally, directing everyone with firm, friendly gestures. But I noticed something as the shoot went on. I was never in the center of any shot, never touching anyone except Adrian. Clara posed with her kids and parents. Miles even got a solo shot with the kids. I was always peripheral. Still, I told myself I was being sensitive. Until that night. After dinner, I went to the den to grab my Kindle and heard voices in the sunroom. The door was mostly closed, but I stopped when I heard my name. I told Dorian to get some shots without Callie, just in case. It was Judith. Clara murmured something I couldn't catch. Judith's voice was clearer. She was never really one of us. I don't want to look back on these photos in 20 years and see a mistake. I stood there, breath shallow, heart thudding. I felt like I'd walked in on a funeral, my own. I didn't tell Adrian right away. I didn't trust myself to speak about it without falling apart. But the next morning, someone else spoke for me. At breakfast, Dorian showed up uninvited. Judith saw him from the kitchen and immediately approached. "If it's about the invoice, I'll handle it later," she said briskly. He shook his head. "No, ma'am, I'm here to speak to Callie." That got everyone's attention. Dorian turned to me. "I need to apologize to you personally. Your mother-in-law asked me to take photos that excluded you. She told me to capture a version of the family, just in case. I refused to do the edits, but I wanted to be honest with you. You have the right to know." Judith's face lost all color. "That's not true," she said. "He misunderstood." Dorian didn't flinch. He pulled out his phone. "I record all my business conversations." He hit play. Judith's voice, crisp and undeniable. Get some shots of the group without her. A clean version. She's not really part of us. I want something timeless. Silence. You could hear someone's fork hit the table. Burton was the first to speak. Judith! That was all he said, just her name, but it sounded like a gavel hitting the bench. Adrian stood slowly. Mom, did you really do this? Judith opened her mouth but said nothing. Her hands shook. I couldn't move. I just stared at the tablecloth like it might explain how this all happened. Eventually, I walked out. Adrian followed me. He didn't even pack, just told me to grab my things. We left that afternoon. Adrian didn't say much during the drive back to Asheville. Neither did I. The weight of what happened had pressed itself into the air around us. Thick, unmoving. We drove in silence, the car engine filling in the spaces where conversation should have gone. He reached for my hand at some point around Columbia. His grip was firm, but I could feel the guilt underneath it. I'm sorry, he said finally. I kept my eyes on the road ahead. She wanted to erase me, I said quietly. From pictures, from the family. Adrian's voice cracked. She's sick, Callie. Sick in the kind of way where she thinks appearances matter more than love. That's not an excuse, but I don't know what else to call it anymore. It wasn't just about the photos. It was what they represented. Judith hadn't just tried to crop me out of an album. She had taken a knife to my place in the family narrative. Cut it like an unwanted section of a story she didn't like. When we got home, I didn't unpack. I showered, sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room, and stared at nothing for a long time. Over the next few days, the fallout unfolded. Clara texted me an apology, one that read more like a safe PR statement than anything heartfelt. Something along the lines of, sorry things got tense. Mom can be intense sometimes. She didn't mention the audio recording, didn't mention the fact that she stood there and let it happen. Anna Lois, however, sent flowers. And a card with a single line, don't let the poison keep you from drinking the water. Families rot from the inside. You're not the rot. Leave it to the eccentric aunt to be the only one who said something real. Adrian stopped answering his mother's calls. He didn't block her, but when she texted or tried to FaceTime, he ignored it. After the fifth call, she left a voicemail, long, rambling, teary. I never listened to it. Adrian did, though. And he didn't share what she said. Not then. I didn't ask. I was tired of her voice, tired of her drama. I was trying to rebuild my peace, but Judith wasn't done yet. 2 weeks after the trip, a package arrived at our house. Adrian brought it in and placed it on the kitchen counter. It had Judith's neat, looping cursive on the label. He stared at it for a long time before slicing it open. Inside were 3 old Renshaw family photo albums, leather-bound, carefully preserved. And a note. Callie, I've looked through these many times and now realize what I never saw before. Not who was in the photos, but who was missing. I never made room for you in our family, and I tried to make that permanent. I failed you. Please don't let my failures define our story. These are yours now, too, if you'll forgive me. Judith, I stood in the doorway watching Adrian read it aloud, his voice flat but steady. I don't know what to say, he said. I do, I replied. Nothing. We didn't respond to her, not right away, because here's the thing people don't talk about with forgiveness. It's not a switch. It's not something you can demand or buy or wrap in a box with old albums and good intentions. It's earned, or sometimes it isn't. But Adrian was still her son, and I could see the war inside him, trying to hold his mother accountable while wanting to believe she could change. He asked if I wanted to talk to her. I said no. Instead, I poured my energy into work. I started a freelance side hustle, took on a few local design clients, and filled my evenings with projects instead of pain. There was something therapeutic about creating beauty when your world had felt so ugly. Adrian started therapy. That was his idea. He said he needed help reconciling the image of the mother he'd grown up with and the woman who could so casually try to rewrite her family history. I supported him in that, even if I couldn't find it in myself to support a reunion with her. A month passed, then another. No contact from Judith, until one morning in late October when Adrian walked into the kitchen holding his phone like it had just exploded. She showed up at Dorian's studio. My heart stopped. What? She asked him to delete the recording, the one with her voice. That caught me off guard, not the fact that she wanted it gone, but that she went to him in person. She begged him, Adrian continued. Cried, said she'd pay him, told him it was tearing the family apart. He told her no. Said it wasn't just a recording, it was the truth. I didn't know whether to be angry or impressed. He called me afterward, Adrian added. Said he thought I should know. She's not trying to make things right, I said slowly. She's trying to erase the evidence, he nodded. That's what it looks like. She still doesn't get it. And she didn't, because Judith's version of making amends was always about perception, never about transformation. Then 3 days later, she sent a letter. Not an email, not a text. An actual handwritten letter, 6 pages long. I didn't want to read it, but I did. She recounted how her own mother had been harsh, unwelcoming to her brother's wife. How she'd learned, over decades, to see people through that same cold filter. She admitted, in great detail, that she had been unkind, judgmental, and controlling. But then came the part that stuck with me. I wanted to protect what I thought was tradition. But what I really did was burn bridges to nowhere. I cut you out because I was afraid of losing control. I tried to make the photos reflect what I thought was a perfect family. But they were never perfect. And you, Callie, were the only honest part of them. I set the letter down and walked out onto our porch. I needed air. That was the first time I cried since Charleston, because part of me wanted to believe her. Needed to believe that people could change. But the other part, the smarter, more guarded part, knew that apologies don't erase consequences. Adrian and I talked late into that night, about what boundaries should look like going forward, about what healing could actually mean, and about what would happen if Judith wanted to see us again. Adrian and I agreed to hold the line, no direct contact, no visits, no holidays. If Judith truly meant what she wrote, then the burden was on her to change, not just to explain. We didn't want her out of our lives forever, but we needed space. A long stretch of silence for the echo of her actions to truly settle in. For 6 months, we heard nothing. Then, one morning in early spring, I received an unexpected email, not from Judith, but from Clara. Subject line: Your invited Renshaw family reunion. The message was polite, formal. It mentioned that the family would be gathering again in Charleston. Same house, same courtyard, same photographer. We'd love for you and Adrian to be there, it read. Mom has something important to say to everyone. I stared at it for a long time. Adrian was hesitant, he didn't trust it. But I felt something stir, not hope, not forgiveness. Something quieter, like an itch at the edge of a scar. I want to go, I said. He raised an eyebrow. Why? Because I'm done hiding, and because I want to look her in the eye while she says it. So we went. We arrived a day early. The house hadn't changed. It still smelled like varnished antiques and judgment. But this time, I didn't feel like a guest. I felt like someone returning to the scene of a fire, not as the victim, but as the one who walked away with the matchbox. The rest of the family trickled in, Clara and Miles with the kids, Burton with his quiet nods, and of course, Judith, who arrived in a navy blue dress like she was attending a formal confession. She approached me immediately, but carefully. No hug, no touch, just a glance and a breath. Callie, she said. Thank you for coming, I nodded. Let's see how the week goes. That night at dinner, Judith stood up to speak. Everyone quieted like it was a press conference. Adrian reached for my hand beneath the table. I asked you all here, Judith began, because I've made mistakes, deep, hurtful ones. She didn't look at me. She looked at her grandchildren. I tried to shape this family into something I could control, something clean, elegant, curated, but in doing that, I became someone I don't recognize. She turned to Adrian and me. And the person I hurt most is Callie. A pause. I tried to erase her from a moment meant to celebrate all of us. Not because she didn't belong, but because I was afraid of what her presence meant. Change. She loved my son, and instead of embracing her, I treated her like an intruder. She looked down at her note cards. There is no excuse for that, only regret. I am sorry. It was well delivered, practiced. She spoke like someone making a final plea before a jury. People clapped. Eloise raised her wine glass. But I didn't clap, I watched. Waited. Because words, even well-chosen ones, are cheap. And that's when I saw it on the table near the fireplace. A large, leather-bound photo album. New, Judith saw me notice. I'd like you to see it, she said softly. I walked over, flipped it open. There I was in every shot, not on the edge. Not in the background. Centered. There was a 2-page spread of just me and Adrian, our arms around each other in the garden. There were candid shots. Me laughing with Burton, me helping Clara's daughter tie her shoe, even one of me and Aunt Alois sipping wine on the porch. But the most surprising part, each photo had a handwritten caption underneath in Judith's pen. Callie helping Ellie with her sandals. A real aunt. Callie's laughter in the garden. Adrian's peace lives here, not an outsider. The heart of the Renshaw family. I closed the book slowly. This wasn't about photos. This was a full reversal of narrative, a retraction of an old lie. Still, I remained silent, not out of spite, but because I wanted time to see if actions would follow these gestures. Judith gave us space for the rest of the weekend. She didn't hover. She let me choose the pace. But revenge, that came quietly, elegantly, and all without a single scream or slammed door. The day we left, Dorian the photographer met us for coffee. He told us Judith had asked him for one final favor. She wanted to update the Renshaw family website, he said, sipping his latte. What do you mean? Adrian asked. She has a little family history site she uses to keep track of old photos, genealogy, Southern tradition. She asked me to update the homepage with this year's album. He smiled. And she insisted that Callie be front and center in the cover photo, said she wanted people to know who the family really was. I let that settle in. It wasn't just about being seen anymore. It was about rewriting the narrative, in full view of the world Judith cared most about. And that was the real win. Because in the end, I didn't have to rage. I didn't have to retaliate. I just had to outlast her story with the truth. And now, when someone visits the Renshaw family page, the first thing they see is me and Adrian, arms linked, standing in the center of a garden in Charleston. Judith's caption underneath it, "Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's who you choose to stand beside."